And thank God it is. All right. So while everyone is kind of logging in to this new Zoom address that we're putting out, I'm going to use this time to maybe ask if any one of you has any questions that I can answer for the last 2 weeks of materials. And I know, you know, some of you I've already spoken to and emailed with, but if there's anything else that you guys have questions about, other than, obviously we have office hours after this, but if there's anything that you want to talk about now, feel free to do that, because sometimes it's good to talk about these questions when other people are also here, because they might have similar questions. No questions. I like it. All right. Well, then I'm going to start sharing my screen. Hopefully that's going to work. Do you guys see a PowerPoint? Yeah. Okay. Yep. Perfect. I'm gonna open up this chat. Where's my chat window? It's not there. I don't know what's going on. All right, so I'm not seeing the chat for some reason, so we have to, you just write down your questions as you have them during the presentation, and then we'll dive into the questions after we're done with our PowerPoint. I'd like to talk about certain terms that we apply that allow profitability. I received one email from, I think it was Tiffany, I don't know if she's here today, in saying, you're showing us, you know, the finance terms, which actually was a great question. She said, you're showing us the finance terms where we have a profit, but what about showing us the finance terms where we don't have a profit or where we lose money? The example that I had given for that was early on, where I gave you guys a scenario where an investor gave us 100% equity and what that would do to our profits or loss. But what I did with Tiffany is I basically used the case study, the prep case study for the midterm, and decided I'm just going to have the sales estimates be lower and I'm going to have the US be lower. So sales estimates were not 70 or 75%. I dropped them down to 60, and the US was not 25 or 35, and I dropped it down to like 15, if I remember this correctly. So what does that do? How does it change? So obviously we ended up having a loss of nearly $2 million. So what I'd like to focus on here is, what terms do we need to focus on in order to allow profitability, and what does it mean for other parties involved in our transaction? Because everyone has a different view of what profit means to them. So that's something we're going to talk about today. I'd like to talk about the waterfall and the structure of it a little more, especially in relation to the various distribution platforms and, you know, theatrical movies and television product. We'll talk about the profit police, as I call them, which is the collection agent. We'll talk a little bit about the free money sources that are, some of them are free, some of them are not so free, but those are the money sources that we are consider as the kind of money that we don't have to pay back before the equity investor recoups, that is. We'll talk a little bit about the business plan and what it should ideally include, and we'll talk about the very different roles of producers for film and for television content, because, you know, there are 15 different producer titles and they mean different things depending on what you're producing. So it's not just the scope of a producer that changes, but it's also changing subject to what you are producing, which is really weird, but that's what it is in this industry. So let's talk about profitability. We have different profiles relating to the different sources of financing that is provided to us. We get money from the bank, we get money from an equity investor, we get money from sales agents potentially, we get money from a mezzanine lender, from a tax credit lender, we might get some in-kind services, we might get a music investment, and of course, we as the producer who creates the content, we'd also like to make some money. Each of these sources have different points of view as to what they need and how they want to make money, and they have different points of view in relation to their risk profile, what they're willing to, you know, take on, and what their appetite is. What kind of money do they want to spend? How do they want to spend it? What kind of fees do they want to charge? And why do they do it the way they do it? And it's important that we understand these differences because we have them as contractual parties. And in order for us to make a deal happen, we need to know their agenda, so to speak. We need to know what works for them. Otherwise, we can't really do a deal. So let's start with the bank. The bank, when they give us a loan, they give us two kinds of loans. One kind is the pre-sale loan, where they are giving us a loan based on an asset that we're providing them with, which is a distribution contract. These pre-sale contracts are distribution contracts, just as a sales contract would be. The pre-sale contract and the sales contract, the only difference that you have here is that the pre-sale is done before the film is finished or the TV show is produced, and the sale is basically done after the show is being produced. That's the only difference, but all of them are distribution contracts. So you're doing a deal with a country and you're deciding, this is how much money I'm going to get as a minimum guarantee, also referred to as the license fee. And this is how I'm going to get that money paid, meaning the distributor is paying me something upfront, like a low down payment, usually between 10 and 20%, and he's going to pay me 80% when I deliver the movie or the show to him. Now, the 20% is given to us in the beginning, and we use that money as a portion to cover our budget cost. The 80% is not given to us until we deliver the product. And that 80% is what the bank looks at to say, I'm going to give you a loan against that. Now, it changes depending on where the 80% are coming from, or where this contract, who the contractual party is. So you've learned that the bank differentiates between countries that are, well established, have distributors who are strong and always pay, and countries that might be economically challenged or have distributors that don't pay so much. And depending on that, they look at these contracts and discount this contract. That's what the tier 1 and tier 2 conversation was we had. When the bank looks at this is what they call collateral. So they take the contract and say, of this contract that is worth this much money on the surface of it, which is the license fee, I will give you X amount. So the bank will give you a term sheet that tells you, based on this collateral, I'm giving you this much money. The second part they look at is, what rights do you still have to sell after you have pre-sold all your rights? So remember, you're doing a whole bunch of rights analysis and projection with your sales estimates, and you are taking out the sales that you have done, meaning the pre-sales. You are left with the rights that you can still sell, the unsold rights. And the bank looks at this to say, I'm going to give you money for this, but I'm not just going to give you the money of the entire amount of unsold rights you have. I'm only going to give you 50% of the unsold rights you have, and that's the maximum I will ever give you. So if you have unsold rights of $5 million that you can still sell, the bank will give you 2.5 million at a maximum. They also limit it by saying, no matter how many unsold rights you have, I will only ever give you up to 20% of the budget. We've talked about this before. I want to reiterate it because I am getting questions about it. So just want you to remember, you have two buckets that the bank looks at as collateral. One is the rights that you have sold. The other bucket is the rights that you haven't sold yet. And the bank will look at these collateral sources in different ways. The way they look at their risk is by saying, not only are we discounting heavily on this collateral that's available to us, but we also determine that we want to recoup in first position before anyone gets anything. In many cases, you will not be able to pay your sales agent. You will not be able to pay anything upfront before the bank's loan is paid back. And I'm talking about the entire bank loan. So that pushes a lot of people down in what we call the waterfall. So you just have to know that when you do deals with actors or directors or whoever, you can't do what is called a gross corridor deal or a first dollar gross deal, which basically means when the movie gets released in the theaters, that this deal would enable this party to get money based on the box office, on the level of the box office, which is the same level than the exhibitor would basically get paid on. So first dollar gross deals are driven by the first monies that come in through the box office, or the first monies that come in from international, for example. So when you have a first dollar deal with the director, and the director says, I want to make 10% of whatever comes in right away when it comes in, that would interfere with your bank loan because you wouldn't be able to deliver that on the part of the director because you have a bank loan. And if the director would insist, yes, what's going on? Is everyone okay here? If the director would insist on this, then you wouldn't be able to have a bank loan. So these are the things you just have to remember when we talk about the recoupment waterfall. So the bank will charge an interest fee, and it usually is driven by what the LIBOR rate is. Now that's a banking rate, for lack of a better word, that's established through the banking system. It's a very complicated process, doesn't really matter. It is what it is. What the bank will do, they will say for this collateral loan that is backed by contracts, I will give you a rate of LIBOR plus 3. So let's say LIBOR is at 2% and they want to add 3 points. So you're paying 5% interest for this portion. The gap loan portion is usually higher. It's usually LIBOR plus 5. So now you're paying, if LIBOR is 2, you're paying 7%. They will, of course, explain this to you in a term sheet. So the term sheet will say exactly, here's how much money we're giving you. Here's what we're charging, on what portion we're charging it on. And here's the loan fees we want. They will charge you likely a loan fee, which is driven by the transaction size, meaning the size of the loan in its totality. And then they're going to ask you to participate in the cost for a closing lawyer, which is a lawyer that represents the bank and represents you in the closing process. And the closing process is the period during which everyone comes together to discuss the collection agent management agreement so that everyone's on the same page. The closing period usually can take between 4 weeks to 6 weeks. If it's complicated, sometimes it's even 2 months. It's comparable to a closing on a house. When you buy a house, there is all these things that go on in the back with all these different documents that the bank is dealing with. And it's the same situation here. A bank closing, just from the document point of view, the documents I've seen for bank closing are anywhere between 100 and 150 pieces of documents, which is a lot. The bank will go through it, the lawyer will go through it, you and your lawyer will go through it, and it just takes its time. The bank will have so low risk profile, but also a very short loan term. I've not seen a loan term that's longer than 3 years. Usually it's between 12 months and 24 months, sometimes even only 18 months. It depends on the bank. And it depends on who your senior lender is, because sometimes it's not a bank. It could be an equity investor that's giving you a senior loan, or it could be a super gap lender that gives you a senior loan and a junior loan. So it really depends who it is, and that is driving the term. Now, when we look at, in comparison to this, to someone who gives you a junior loan, a mezzanine lender, they kind of go by the same rules, but they are a little less pushy or a little less requesting when it comes to collateral. So when the bank, for example, says, I'm going to want 200% coverage on my gap loan, which means if I give you $1 million, I want to see $2 million in available collateral to recoup. The mezzanine lender would say, if I give you $1 million, I want to see $1.5 million to recoup from. So their collateral requirement is a little less stringent than what a bank would do. So that's something to remember in a case where you have a bank loan already and then you have only so much collateral left to give to the senior lender. You might not have enough to even have a senior lender, and you have to go potentially straight to the equity investor depending on what's going on in your finance plan. But usually the mezzanine lender requires less of a collateral. They are really betting on the upside also, because when you require less collateral, you are really in a position where you say, well, if I only am covered 150%, I'm really hoping that this movie is going to do well and that the US is sold very well, so I can also recoup from there if needs be. They are therefore often asking for a back-end participation and a premium on top of an interest charge that they might be charging. I have done deals with mezzanine lenders where I paid all three things. I paid an interest up front that was pretty high, in some cases 15%, up to 15% per year, which is a lot. I had to still pay them a premium on their money, which was usually around 10%. And they wanted a small back-end participation, which I don't think I've ever paid more than 5% back-end profits. But it adds up. So it's not a cheap loan for you to look at. They usually want to see projects that have commercial elements to them, A-level cast, A-level directors, strong showrunners. The banks, on the other hand, they couldn't care less what kind of project it is. If it's an art house movie, that's $500,000. Great. If it's a big $30 million movie with A-level cast, great. They don't read scripts. They don't care. All they care about is who is selling the movie and what contracts are we looking at. That's what the bank will look at. The mezzanine lender looks at who's selling the movie, what contracts are we looking at, if any. Sometimes they take a US deal and say we want the US deal as a security. Who is that? And then they look at the elements of the movie. Who is in it? Who is the cast? What's the deal? What are the sales estimates? Who is selling domestic? Is it sold by a talent agency or not? Is there a deal already in place? So they're looking at that very, very strongly, like an equity investor would in assets. The bank, if you don't pay the bank loan back, they will take over your movie and then they fire sale all the rights that are available for whatever they can get in order to make their loan back. This will very likely be a lot less than what your projections would have given you. And it will very much hurt the equity investor because they will only get what's left. The mezzanine lender will do the same thing. If the bank loan gets paid back and now the mezzanine loan doesn't get paid back, then the mezzanine lender has the right to take over your movie and sell everything off the way they want. They take over everything and they might even fire the sales agent and have their own sales agent. They have the power to do this. This happened to me on one movie and it's pretty drastic. So you want to, I always say, I kind of want to avoid mezzanine lenders because the risk of them, of that loan not being paid off sometimes is there. I rather want to deal with an equity investor who I get that portion from and who is on my side, who is with me on the journey of making, a profit with this thing and is not having, is not hovering over me and saying, why don't I have money after 2 years? So an equity investor is someone who obviously looks at what collateral is available. So what they will look at is there a loan in front of me? Is there a senior lender in front of me? How much money are they making, including the premium? Basically, what is being taken away from me first, and then what is left for me to make my money back with? In many cases, you will have enough to have a one-on-one conversion. And so that means that there isn't any extra collateral, there isn't any extra cushion for the equity investor, which is why many equity investors are really hoping that the US deal is going to be something that they can make money with. So they're hoping that because the US deal is not part of your international sales estimates, they're hoping that that will be what, in the end of the day, will drive them to their profit and to making them more money. They're also more in it for the longevity of it and the potential of franchises, potential of merchandising, potential of ancillary rights revenues, which none of the other investors really care for unless you have a mezzanine lender who is in with profit participation, a very small one. The equity investor is really there to say, I'm on this journey with you. I'm charging you a 20% premium. I want to see my money usually covered by what's there internationally, but I want to see my upside come from the US. So when you give them a business plan, it is important that the finance sources that you put together give enough room and enough collateral in the end, enough rights to still be sold from international to cover your equity. If it's close enough that it's covered, that's great. If it's a little less, also great. But if it's a lot less, it's going to be very hard. And if it's a lot less on paper, it's going to be very hard to attach an equity investor because they don't see how they can recoup just based on what they're looking at, which is projections. So the equity investors looking for one-on-one coverage, they want the upside to come from the US, ideally. They do want a larger back end, which is 20% at minimum usually. And they want a large, or I should say significant profit participation. Industry standard, as I mentioned before, is they get 50% of whatever the amount is that they're investing in relation to the production cost. So if they're giving you $1 million on a $2 million movie, they're investing 50%. Their back end for this movie or the ownership participation would be 25%, 50% of the 50%. There are equity investors who ask for more, and then it's not entirely unreasonable to have a conversation with them to give them a little more, because again, they take the risk with you. If they don't ask for it, don't volunteer it. But if they do ask for it and it's something where, if they ask for a lot of backend, that's a whole different conversation, because if they ask for everything or 80%, you're basically working for them. And then it's not necessarily fun. However, if it's your first movie or it's your first project, I would say go for it, because your job is to make anything happen. It's not necessarily just about making a lot of money on your first project, but it's about making the first project happen. So you have something to learn from and you have something to build up on. Now, when we look at a tax credit lender, they don't really look at international projections. They look at the budget, they look at the rules and regulations the intensive region is providing you with when it comes to shooting your project there. And the rules and regulations in these regions, in these tax credit or subsidy driven regions, change per project you're shooting there. A television project might have different regulations than a film project. Happens a lot in Europe, for example. Might not so much be the case in the US. And they are having different regulations in regards to what they consider an eligible expenditure. One entity will say we're doing above the line, cast, director, producer. Another territory would say we're not doing any of it, we're just doing below the line. And the tax credit lender looks at these regulations very carefully and has an assumption done by an accounting firm that they approve. And based on that assumption on what the tax credit will be after you have shot the movie or the TV show, they will give you a loan based on what they see. Their way of discounting is charging you a fee for it. So if it's a tax credit region that is a little iffy or one that they don't have enough experience with, or if it's one that is new, they will usually charge a higher fee. I've never been paid more than 25%, usually shouldn't be more than that. If it's something that they know that's established, the fee can go all the way down to 5%. That's kind of the range you're dealing with. Now, they do want to go for tax credit regions that pay them back fast. So when New York, for example, changed the repayment to a 5-year installment situation, a lot of tax credit lenders were not happy with that. And they said, well, if we do New York, we're going to have to charge more money. And that kind of hurt everyone. So you want to be in a region where the tax credit or the subsidy comes back to the lender fairly quickly, meaning within a year of the region getting your paperwork. Now, what you do is you're basically just handing over the cost report and everything to the accountant that the tax credit lender works with, and they will take care of everything. You don't have to do more. What you don't want to do is you don't want to put the tax credit lender in your collection agent management agreement as someone that recoups from any other source other than the subsidy region that they are funding against, and really just working with the subsidy region if there's any issue, because we do not want that liability. When we talk about sales agents, they look at a project in a way that says, how can I make money with this? There's 2 ways for them to make money with it. They just take it on and sell it for you. So they sell all the international rights. Usually they do not sell the US, they usually sell international. Some sales agents do also have relationships with US parties, so they might say, we also want to sell the US. But they look at a project saying, how commercial is this? How much money can I make with this? That's what they're interested in. So they're not going to be too excited about something that has no cast, B-level cast, or is a genre that is harder to sell, like a drama genre or something of that sort. So the sales agent is very much driven by, how can I make money? And I can only make money if I sell it and if I sell it fast. What sells fast is what's commercial. They will look at the budget, and depending on what their projection is, if it's a lower budget, the fee is usually a little higher. If it's a higher budget, the fee is usually a little lower. So it should be anywhere between 15 and 25%, in that range. Now, when the sales agent goes and says, I'm going to give you a minimum guarantee, I like it so much, this project, I'm going to lock it down and I'm going to give you an advance. You can take that advance and you will then not take the bank loan. We talked about this because the sales agent is recouping his advance when he makes sales. So he takes the sales that he makes as his revenue, the same way the bank would. The bank doesn't share the recoupment corridor with anyone. So in that case, if you have a sales agent who gives you a loan, or in this case, it's really a minimum guarantee that they pay up front, you take that, you forget the bank. It's better to do that for you. They might charge more. In that case, the sales fee might go up to 35%, which is okay for the period that you're repaying this. In some cases, the sales agent would want to become an executive producer and would say to you, if I give you money for this, I'm really like an investor. So I also want to make some back end, or I also want to have some say, in certain things on the creative notion or who you're casting or whatnot. So you want to be open to a conversation where you make the sales agent your co-producer maybe, or your executive producer or co-executive producer, whatever the credit is that we're talking about. We'll talk about later what it is. But there are certain sales agents who would want that when they give you a minimum guarantee. So it's not the worst thing. What you want to avoid is that you share any rights with them in addition to what they're doing. Meaning if they have the right to sell you a movie or TV show for a certain amount of time, for a certain amount of fee and expenses, you don't want to give them the rights to, own the movie with you, even though they are investing. This is not an equity investment. This is basically a loan. And as a lender, they should really not have any ownership rights. You can give them a few back end participation points if they want it, that's fine. But the ownership, the IP, should not be held by you and the sales agent. And I say this because I've made the mistake of sharing my IP with the sales agent. The sales agent went bankrupt and I lost my entire movie because it went into the bankruptcy mess. So I speak out of experience that this is not a great thing to do. So you don't want to share your LLC with them. You don't even want to have them in the movie LLC. You want to keep everyone out of that movie LLC other than your equity investor. Now, when we look at music investments, the collateral here is pretty clear. It's your music rights revenues. The music investor, however, will look at the sales projections. They will look at the sales agent as well, and they will determine if this is someone who they feel will sell this project very well across the globe. If it's a newcomer, if it's a small sales agency, if it's someone they don't know, they might be hesitant in giving you a music investment because the music investment is driven by how many sales they make into how many countries they go, because that's what drives the music rights revenues and the royalties. So they might look at who you're choosing to be your sales agent. So you just need to know that. They will obviously talk to you about the music budget. They will probably talk to you about who should be the music supervisor. And they will do a lot of the admin stuff that is related to, doing cue sheets and administrating all these rights revenues all over the world. So their view and their profit is really where's the movie sold and how many music royalties do we get. Now the post services, they are profiting in two different ways. First of all, they need to keep their company running. So they want to sign on as many productions as they can to get them into their facilities. So, and the same is for visual effects houses. That is why they often suggest an in-kind service component where they say, we're going to maybe split up the fees. Maybe we'll pay half of the music budget, half of the post budget or visual effects budget now, and then we pay the other half in the recoupment corridor. And then when it comes in the recoupment corridor, we get a little premium on that portion, and that's fine. But their interest is really in securing a project early on and not having you go to another company. So it's really about establishing a relationship with you early on. And for that reason, you can ask them to defer some of their costs early on. And many people will do this. When it comes to your profitability, your job is to create a finance plan the way we talk about in this course to give you the best start you can get from the get-go by working on projects that have a strong international sales value that is verified through pre-sales. That's important for you. People always say, oh, pre-sales are not possible today. And I always say, you're lazy or you have a shit project. It's one or the other. Yes, it is harder to do pre-sales today. We know this, but they're still possible. They are really driven by what is this project and how much do they want from me. So if you're doing a $20 million movie with no one in it, you're not going to pre-sell this. If you're doing a $5 million movie with someone meaningful in it, you are going to pre-sell it. We are driven today by the fact that these budgets are going down drastically. So we as producers have to be very aware of making these movies for very little money, which is why it's important to structure the finance plan in a way that we actually make money. These small budgets will not allow us to make any real money on the producing fee. So this is already a given. So why do we do this? We want to make money in the profits and we want to make money with the equity. So it is important for us to do a finance deal where we don't have 50,000 people that we have to pay. We don't have, a lot of profit participation that we have to share with. And we do deals that are very stringent where the only party that we're really having in our LLC is our equity investor, and we're trying to keep him as low as we can so we can make money as producers. Now, structuring the finance plan in a way that we say our sales agent hopefully gives us a minimum of 70% projections from international distribution rights revenues and can hopefully pre-sell 30% of the budget would be great. Now, if this doesn't happen, which can happen, the sales agent might say to you, you know what, I can really only make 60% of the budget with this thing. I'm sorry. Then it is your job to figure out a way to get non-recoupable finance sources that you can beef up the missing 10% here. So try to do deferment deals with the post houses, try to do deferment deals with your crews, try to go maybe into a tax credit region where you get a little more money. Try to do things that make up that balance that you're now missing from the revenues. You have to become very aware of the fact that if you don't hit that number, you have to find money somewhere that will help you, brand integration, crowdfunding, whatever it takes, slice it together and make that missing 10% up in a way that you don't have to repay. It's very important for you to keep that in mind, because if you don't hit these minimum numbers, not only will you not make money, but your equity investor will likely not make money either. That's why we structure this finance plan the way we do, because it is shown to work. Now, your job is to keep as much ownership and backend as humanly possible. So you want to share only what you need to share with the writer, director, and cast, and your equity investor. So your job is really to do deals where you can keep the majority of shares in your LLC and the control over your content. That's really important. Do you have any questions about this part? Yes, Marion, go.
Yeah, I was reading about crowdfunding with gentleman on the video that I saw, and he was saying how you can, when you're having a tight budget, you can just do the crowdfunding through various ways of collecting collateral like that. And if you are short, the various ways could help you in an emergency situation.
Yeah, that's exactly, exactly. And there are so many crowdfunding sites that, they're not just Kickstarter and GoFundMe. There are many other sites, I believe, by now. I mean, I've not used them very much. I'm not the specialty person on crowdfunding, honestly. But a lot of colleagues of mine, especially when they do documentary series or documentary shows, so they're always like this little piece missing, they do that. So that's definitely something to think about. Another thing you can do, which I haven't even put in here, but it just comes to mind, is a bridge loan. So let's say you're in the closing process, and thank you for asking, Marilyn, because it gave me the idea about this. When you are missing a piece because all of a sudden you figure out the one company wants more money, they're not closing, they're not giving me an insurance on this project unless I lift my budget up by whatever, 100,000, 200,000. There is a way for you to buy time to try to find it, maybe through crowdfunding or something else, or maybe you talk to someone, or maybe you talk to the equity investor, because sometimes you do have that little gap in the end. You can work this gap by working with the bridge lender to say, okay, I need you to come up with this portion while I'm closing, maybe this equity investor to give me $200,000 more. Or let's say the bank takes longer time to close, and the distributors haven't paid all their monies in for the down payment. There is some delay. The bridge lender comes to you and says, if you're waiting for someone to pay, I'm going to advance that. So there is a way for you to work with bridge lenders for monies that are missing in the last round, as long as you can show that it's going to come from someone at some point. These lenders will take that collateral and help you over this bridge so you can close your bond and you can start producing your movie. Because none of these finance sources will be released to you until the bond company put an insurance on this project, so that you can actually start shooting. So you are going to deal with a little bit of timing that might mean to you that you have to start because your actor is there, you need to shoot, things are happening, you're already pre-production, everything's going, one company is late. I think I've used bridge lenders at least 3 times. Now they are expensive because they basically charge you, I've paid one per day interest, the other one per week, and the other one per month, depending on The monthly one was cheapest, but the daily one was expensive, 2.5% per day. I mean, that stuff adds up. So they are expensive, but they give you options. So crowdfunding, if you can do a little bit of a, beefing up the last little piece that's missing, would obviously the most ideal, would be the most ideal situation. Anyone else with any question on this part? Okay, so when we talked about very early on, about your Harry Potter example, on how, people say, oh, this is Hollywood creative accounting because they deduct all these things, and no one really knows what they're deducting. The fact of the matter is, there is a definition somewhere in a contract that defines exactly what can be deducted. And you need to use that in all your contracts in defining exactly what you're going to be deducting. So when you do a deal with a studio and the studio says, we're going to deduct interest fees, we're going to deduct distribution fees, we're going to deduct marketing fees, we're going to deduct accounting fees, we're going to deduct la, 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 it's in the contract. It's just people don't always read these long-winded profit definitions, because a definition from a studio that defines what profit is probably 30 pages long, and that's okay. But in the end of the day, you just have to know that they don't just deduct willy-nilly what they want. They deduct what is contractually owed to them and what they want to deduct, which is usually anything related to marketing and distribution and cost of funding that they have to occur because it's part of their business too. In our case, as a producer, we want to define what our expenses could be. We could potentially have P&A, because we might have a P&A investor who helps us to release the movie internationally. Sorry, not internationally, domestically. But we might have international P&A costs that we have to deal with if we decide we're going to release the movie, not just in the US, but we take it maybe to one other country like Canada. Maybe we'll decide, we'll do it in England. Who knows how crazy we are if we want to do a release campaign. But the point is, the P&A and the cost of the P&A needs to be deducted, and it's an expense. All the distribution fees that we're paying, and these are not just the distribution fees that you're paying to the sales agent and the expenses, anything you do. You might do a press junket, you might go to Cannes and have maybe something happening on your yacht for your movie. You might have some language tracks that you figure out you have to produce. You might have a soundtrack you feel you want to do. Whatever it might be, you want to have all this covered under distribution fees and costs, sales fees as well, collection agency fee. When you deal with a collection agent, they don't do this for free. They want to get paid, and they have an initiation fee, or I should call it what is it called? I think it's initiation fee. I don't know what they call it. And then they have their 1% that they charge on whatever monies are coming in. You need to talk about the cost that you have with the investments. The bank loan, okay, there is the interest, but what about the lawyer that goes with it? That lawyer is not deducted from the bank loan that the bank is giving you. You have to pay that person. So there is another $150,000 going to that man. So all the costs related to the money that you are sourcing needs to be defined in your profit definition. So you need to know that when you start paying people and when revenues are coming in, these things have to be accounted for, and these things are to be allowed to be deducted. So every agreement you do, especially an agreement you do with an equity investor, would include a very clear expense definition that can be applied as a deduction. You want to be able to obviously pay all of your production costs, that's a given, but believe it or not, when you have deferments, you need to put that in there too, because deferments are production costs that just happen at a later time. So it's important for you to make sure that you exactly describe everything you are going to deduct. For example, if you have an equity investor who is participating in merchandising rights, well, we're building toys. Those people that are building those toys or manufacturing those toys want to get paid. The people that develop the toys want to get paid. The brand managers who do all these merchandising deals want to get paid. There is a brand management and merchandising allocation to be expensed. So you have to think about all the different things you can do to generate revenues, and what do these generating revenues items cost you. All of those need to be in your profit definition. It's very important. And then when it comes to profit participation, you obviously say profit participation is paying everyone at the same time in accordance with the percentage that they were allocated contractually. So when you have expenses that you owe someone else, it is your job to cap them. So when the sales agent says to you, I want to have distribution expenses of 5%, you can say, yeah, you're going to get your 5% up to an amount of $50,000. Someone else says, the toy person that, you know, puts these toys together for you and manufactures them or develops them says, oh, I might have expenses in, you know, in connection with this. You can say, yeah, you can charge me some expenses up to $25,000. You have to put caps in for any expenses that are generated by third parties that you're going to be affected by. So the idea is whenever you have an expense conversation with someone who's giving you a service, you need to think about a way of capping that expense and need to at least bring it up. If I don't want to cap it, it's one thing, but this cap will make it much easier for you to sell all these expenses to an equity investor who's going to say, so who are we paying? What are we paying for as we are generating revenues? And what is it going to cost to generate those revenues? Questions on this? Okay, so when we do a waterfall, we are talking about a structure that has to do with all the various parties that we work with and that we include in our financing situation. So we have obviously the producers, that is us, and any other producer that we might engage and work with. They're going to be in the collection agent management agreement, and they're going to be in the waterfall if they participate in any way. If the crew or talent or a service provider deferred money, they're going to be in this waterfall and they're going to be in the collection agreement. Anyone who has a profit participation, even if it's a small 1% profit to, I don't know, some guy who gave you a location for free, doesn't matter. They all have to be allocated and they all have to be thought of when you put this collection agreement together. SAG and other guilds, WGA, DGA, all these people need to be in the collection agency agreement. We heard Cheryl talk about this. And then we have our banks, obviously. Now, the banks may or may not want to be part of the collection agent management agreement, depending on if they are recouping through the collection agent or if they're requiring to have their own recoupment account, in which case they would recoup outside of the collection agent. But even then, that allocation that goes to the bank is going to be mentioned in your collection agreement to make sure that everyone understands we have a senior loan that's going to be going this way. Sales agent and distributors, depending on what they're getting. Sales agent is automatically in the collection agent management agreement because they're getting the sales fee and expenses. But there might be other distributors, like a US distributor that you do a deal with, who would also be in there. So every party that's going to be in your collection agent management agreement is going to be part of your waterfall and is going to be mentioned in the agreement as to how much money they're getting, when are they getting it, and what are they getting it from. Because not every party, like the P&A investor, would recoup from all revenues. They might just recoup from the US revenues. So it will be defined very clearly. Equity investor obviously is in there, all your lenders, all your investors. It will be defined clearly who gets what, how much, based on what occurrence and from what collateral. So all of this is done by the collection agent. He will draft all this. All you need to do is tell them, this is what I'm doing, here are my agreements, and they're going to draft something. And then it will say exactly who gets paid what. Now, when you have a situation where you have a deal with an actor and the actor is in the collection agent management agreement as getting paid, and you don't want necessarily everyone to know that they're getting paid something else, or they're getting paid a very high amount, and you don't want people to necessarily know, you can do what is called an instruction letter. Now, the equity investor is a different story. They will know who recoups in front of them. But not every team member needs to know what you're paying the actor. Not everyone in this collection agent management agreement need to know all these details. There is a way to say, we're going to pay in accordance with an instruction letter. So that instruction letter is a side letter to the collection agent management agreement that is usually done with talent. It's not really done with anyone else than talent, in case there is a special component going on with them that you don't necessarily want to advertise with everyone. So your karma agreement is basically the most complex agreement you will do in your entire process, because that agreement puts all the other agreements into one place and structures them. And that's when you see how things fit together. And it might be that you then notice, darn, not everything fits together, and then you have to renegotiate maybe some deals. But it is important to have this agreement in place, and your equity investor will be very grateful for you having this, because it will show him exactly what's going on, when he's going to get paid, and what he can expect, and who else is getting what. So it is a transparency document that everyone should have. And I should tell you, unfortunately, not many producers out there don't do collection management agreements. I don't know why, but they don't. And it is something that will enable your conversation with an equity investor to be much smoother when you can tell them, we're going to do everything through a collection agent. It's like an escrow company, and there's going to be this collection agent management agreement, which is like an escrow agreement, where everything that happens on this movie financially and otherwise is going to be combined, and it's entirely transparent. They will appreciate this. Now, when we talk about the path to profit and the waterfall, we're talking about a structure that happens as to who gets paid what and when. So when we have a theatrical movie, we have box office revenues. At the level of the box office revenues, usually the first split occurs where the box office are split between the theater owner, the exhibitor, and the studio. So there's usually a split, I don't know, 30%, 70%, 40%, 60%. Whatever the studio deal is with the exhibitor is what will occur here. That's not something you can really, how do you say, influence. It's really depending on the deal between the studio and the exhibitor. It's usually not something you have anything to do with. You will have something to do with it if you self-release. If you do decide you're going to do your own release, your own P&A campaign, and you want to do your own movie, and you want to do a deal directly with the exhibitors, the theater owners, in that case, you can do a deal like this. You can do a split deal yourself. In many cases, you can do also just a deal where you say, I'm just going to rent this theater for these and these many weeks at these and these many times. So you can do that too, in which case you can likely receive, you pay a rental fee, and then you'll get the box office. So there are different deals to be made. But in general, what happens is the movie gets theatrically released. There is a split between the theater and the exhibitor, the theater exhibitor and the studio, and the balance goes to the studio. So let's say you have a deal with the studio, and the studio says, okay, here's how much money we're making. The studio will tell you, we got this percentage of ticket sales from the box office, and that's what you then will deal with. This is the money you look at and say, okay, the studio made of the 20 million box office that we have, they got 50%, so they got 50%. That 10 million is gone. You don't worry about it anymore. It's not yours, but you're now looking at the 10 million that the studio has. This is where the studio will charge the fees and their costs and all their expenses. But this is also the portion where the P&A lender will say, this is what I'm going to make my money with. So the P&A lender is going to be very much interested to know what's the split going to be, and what are we expecting in box office revenues. So the P&A lender will likely have a conversation with you and say, I want the studio to give us projections what they believe they can make in the US box office. So they really want the studio to make a statement to say, we're going to release this movie on 500 screens. We think we can make this much money with it. And they usually give a range. They basically give an estimate similar to what a sales agent would do for international distribution rights revenue. So their marketing department will say, here's what we think we're going to do. The P&A lender will look at it and say, okay, fine, I'll give you the money for the P&A. Now, when the studio pays the P&A, which happens a lot if they acquire the movie for theatrical distribution, you don't need a P&A lender in that case. They will do those calculations in-house and say, okay, how much P&A do we want to spend on this thing? What do we think it's going to make? So it's an in-house conversation that they likely will not share with you, but they'll pay the P&A, so you don't really care. Or you might care because you say, I don't want you to pay more than X in P&A, but you will likely not have much say about this, because the studio might just give you your minimum guarantee, and then they're going to release the movie and you're out. But if you do have a P&A lender and you rent a studio, in that case, you want to have the conversation with the studio to say, how much box office do you think we can make? Because that will drive how much money you get from the P&A lender. Now, if, let's say, the studio releases the movie and they take care of everything. They bought the US rights from you. They gave you $3 million for the US. They take the movie out, they release it, it's all theirs. They take it out to the theaters, they take it out on their platforms, they take it out to their network stations. They own and control the entire revenue chain for the territory that they bought, which in this case is the US. It is gone for you for the period of time that they bought it for. So it's the same deal than you would do with your international buyers. And as the international buyers, here too, the studio would pay overages. Overages is they take the movie out, they make box office revenues, they have streaming revenues, they have network revenues, they have all these different revenues. They charge all their fees, distribution fees, expenses, P&A, whatever monies they have. And if there is money left at the end, they will also deduct the MG that they paid you. They will pay you an overage percentage in accordance with the contractual agreement that you have with them. If it's a 50-50 deal, they will keep 50% of the overages, you get the other 50% of the overages. This is the same than the deal you would do with any international distributor that buys your movie. Usually it's a 50-50 split on overages. You never know. I have done a movie with Sony and I've gotten overages, I think 3 times now. This hell is great. So who knew? So, you know, some studios are, I mean, most studios are pretty honest about it. And it's a beautiful thing because it's going to happen the entire time. If the movie does well, it's not even a thing about does the movie well in the box office because they generate monies wherever they show these movies. So they might just show it on Amazon Prime, they might show it in different places. So the movie generates money and then you get to participate in that. Now, when we look at the waterfall, now we have the US side. So whatever's left in the US goes into the collection agency account. And then the revenues from international go into the collection agency account. The first people, usually it's the bank that is paid first. And then the next in line is your guilds. So if there's guild residuals, anything you have to pay to the guilds, this is where they get paid. So they get usually paid right after the bank. In some cases, you know, the sales agent, if they like bicker around and say, we want to get paid first. I have seen situations where, you know, maybe it's not always the case, but the sales agent did get some sales fees. But in many cases, the guilds are very stringent on, we want to get paid right in the beginning. We want our residuals to be secure. That's what we owe to our members. The sales agency fee would in that case come after the collection agent would pay his first percent. So you pay the bank, you pay the guilds, you pay the collection agent, you pay the sales agent, you pay your mezzanine lender, you pay your equity lender, you pay your deferments, and then you pay all your profit participants. So this waterfall that you see here can slightly shift depending on the contractual obligations that you agree with people and the parties. But I want you to understand what happens domestically, what happens internationally, and how it all kind of trickles down in many cases. Are there slight shifts? Yes, because projects are different and the relationship between the funders that give you the money and you in relation to the content might be slightly different, but the rough structure that you see here is going to likely be applicable. Now, when we talk about these collection agents, they look at all your agreements and they will pay everyone when they're supposed to get paid, what they're supposed to get paid. So there is no risk that people will be overlooked. There is no, I mean, I've never seen it happen, to be honest with you, because these people are real sticklers. That's all they do all day long. And there's only 2 collection agents in this entire industry. And they're helping you not just structure this accounting part of it, which is worth every penny, but they also take away the liability. So if something is not paid right, or if the equity investor starts moaning around, where's my money, where's my money? You don't have the money because you never get anything until everyone gets paid. The fact that you don't touch any revenues and that you actually don't get any money protects you in this case. You do want to also establish that with the equity investor and saying, you're going to get your reports straight from the collection agent. You're not getting it from me, you're getting it straight from them. And if you have questions about the report, call them up, they'll explain it to you. And that's what they do. So the nice thing about having a collection agent is if someone looks at the report and says, I don't understand, why are they getting money and what's what? Call the collection agent. They'll explain it and they'll walk you through it. So you don't even have to worry about that. This collection agency agreement and the collection agent, their role is to keep everything neutral and to keep everything transparent. This way, there's no Hollywood accounting going on because everything happens exactly the way it's supposed to and exactly the way it's contractually obligated and contractually agreed. So there's no hiding. The other advantage that you have in using a collection agency is you're not going to pay certain taxes that might apply. You get money from all these different countries, and all these different countries have different tax rules. And if you just take the money from a country direct, you might have to pay what is called holdbacks or taxes that are applicable all of a sudden. You don't want to deal with all of that because that's money you'll probably never see again. So these collection agents are located in areas, Hungary and Netherlands, where they are not subject to any taxation, to make it simple. I mean, the tax situation is pretty complex, but long story short is, because they are where they are, you're not dealing with any tax holdbacks of the various countries that are paying you, and that's worth a lot of money too. So they take care of all these tax regulations. If there is something that needs to be paid off, there is a holdback that's required by any of the territories that bought your movie, they will take care of it, and they'll let you know, and it's going to be in the collection agent management agreement. So there is a pro and con situation when we talk about slate deals. You know, slate deals, the beauty of a slate deal is you have not just one project. You created your little company, you're developing 5 projects, let's say, and they're very different in budgets and genres. You have a documentary series, you have a documentary feature, you have a small budget movie, you have a medium budget movie, and you have maybe a television show. So you put these things together, offering diversity to your investors. And that's a beautiful thing because they like that. So the diversification minimizes the risk for the investor because they say, well, if this one doesn't work, then that one's going to work. It's obvious, right? It will also provide you with better distribution deals when you start selling this stuff, and it gives you advantageous terms for financing costs. So that's a good thing. I think I have a slate financing structure that I can share with you. When you guys are a little more in, I'll share with you a whole slate financing Excel spreadsheet, for lack of a better word, that's all automated, and I'll walk you through that at some point. I think that might be interesting. So if it's not interesting, I'm not going to bore you with it. But I do have it. If someone wants to see it, I'm happy to send it. Let's put it this way. It is complex because what you do is you put every movie in your Excel sheet with the revenues related to just this movie, with the costs related to just this movie or this project, and with everything that gets deducted from just this project. And then you do the next one. What's happening here? What are the revenues? What are my terms with people? What do I think I'm doing here? You go next one, next one, next one. And then the revenues that come out of all of this will go into a summary sheet. And then the investor will see, aha, this is what this is the profile for this movie, this is the profile for this show, this is this, and they all kind of level out. And some structures will show that not every movie is going to make a huge amount of money. Not every show is going to make a huge amount of money. And so it's going to be very honest in the sense that it will show you, here is the different things that can happen, and here it all works out in the end when it all goes together. Here's the con. You have to think about the fact that you have to get these movies and projects made in a certain period of time. Because if you get slate financing, it's usually limited to a term. So an investor, or usually it's capital firms that do these deals, and they prefer these deals. And they say to you, we'll give you a loan for all these projects, and it's a 5-year loan. It's kind of a normal thing. And that means you have to get most of these made within the first 2 years. Because if you don't get them made early on, you're going to start losing money because you're not going to be able to generate the revenues that you have projected for this slate. And you know that you're going to need at least 2 to 3 years to get all the revenues in. So if you start producing too late, you're going to affect your profit. So the stress is going to be on you to say, I'm going to get all these projects done within the first 2 years. I'm going to package them all. I'm going to get all these actors on. And now here's what happens. You get the actor on. By the time you get to shoot, the actor says, oh, you know what? I got this other movie. I'm not going to go. Can you sue the actor? Yes. Do you want to do that? Likely not. Because you rather want to just fix the problem very quickly and find a different actor. These things cause delays. You might find that all of a sudden a tax credit region where you wanted to shoot to get 50% of your budget blows up. No more 50% of your budget. Now they have to rejigger your numbers or find another tax credit region that gives you close to that. The fact that you have a certain period of time where you're putting these projects together also means you have a certain period of time where things can change. This is the thing you have to remember when you do a slate deal. So when you put a slate deal together, the con would be the development of it needs to be really tight, and you need to work on projects where you control a lot very easily and simply without too much drama. So you choose projects where you control most of the elements and you don't hopefully have to deal with any kind of replacement. You deal, however, with things that you cannot control. Actors not there, and then maybe the pre-sales are not coming in time. Maybe your sales agent says, yeah, you know, this movie that you wanted to do with Jason Statham was great at the time we talked about it, but now it's 2 years later, no one wants to do a movie with Jason Statham anymore. So you have that, and now the pre-sales are not coming in. So the more time you take to put your projects together, the more it affects your entire slate. When you do rush your development, you're not taking enough time to get the script done properly. You're not taking enough time to, did something happen? Okay, everything is fine. All right, I thought, okay. You're not taking enough time to really, you know, get the project cast the right way. What happens a lot with slates, and that's why they're a little frowned upon, is that these projects have to be pushed through so fast that producers don't really take the time to, you know, really work on these scripts long enough. And when I did it, I have to say, I've done slate financing, I've raised money for slate financing. I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of making these movies happen because I needed to turn the money quickly. Did they make money? Yes. Could the scripts have been better? I think so, honestly. So I know what it means to be under the gun for timing reasons and have investors standing behind you with a gun to your head saying, get this done. So you want to be cognizant of that. And the other thing that is dangerous, and that's why I actually said no to a line of credit that was offered to me for $200 million. I know it sounds crazy, but the unused commitment fee, I think, was 0.5%. So that means someone gives me $200 million and says, here's your money. It's available for you tomorrow. Now I need 1 or 2 years to get all these movies made or all these projects done. I'm paying 0.5% this entire time while I'm putting all this together. Now, where's that coming from? I have to pay that out of my pocket. That's a problem. So you don't want to deal with a slate investor who says to you, I'm going to give you this money, but you need to pay if you don't use it. Bad situation. And a lot of these slate financiers do this. So now I'm working with I'm putting together another slate. I'm working with a group who I made very clear, if you have unused commitment fees, we can forget about the whole thing because I'm not doing it. But if you allow me to pay you based on what I'm pulling, like a real line of credit, where I pull what I need and pay money on what I actually pulled, then we have something to talk about. So that's where I'm steering this conversation. And that would be where you would be steering this conversation. If you put a little slate together for your company and say, I want to get a line of credit for this, and I really only want to pay for the money that I'm actually using. Any questions on this?
I got a question.
Yes.
With slate financing agreements, can you negotiate for a longer period of time for your agreement instead of saying it having to be done in a period of 3 or 4 years, making it more like 6 or 7 years? Does that, and is that something that's doable? And is that something that you would want as a producer as well?
You can negotiate longer deals. It's just a matter of, is it, you know, can you get your return looking good? Because I do usually 5 years, and here's why. If I spread out, if I take 2 years more, my per year return is going to drop significantly, which makes it very uninteresting for the investor. They want to see at least 15% per year coming to them on paper. It's not real, but it's on paper. So the longer I spread out the term, the slimmer this amount gets. So if I have 15% per year for 5 years, it's going to be 10% if I have 7 years or something like that. So that's kind of what I'm dealing with when I'm looking at these terms. So I'm always trying to work it in a way where I know I can. That's why I do documentary series and series. I'm not going to be contingent on cast, because cast is usually the main problem, because cast is temperamental. We don't know what's going on, and I understand things change and things happen. So that's where I am careful. So the movie that is cast driven, I would usually try to do first, and then the other stuff that I control, I'll try to do later, so that it's not affecting me in my slate. So it's really something where I look very closely on my project. Again, you can ask for a longer time. You just have to make sure that your revenue gives an equity investor or the company that gives you the slate money, gives them enough for it to be still interesting to them. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, that does.
Yeah. Anyone else questions about this? Okay. Let's talk about the business plan. So you guys have, looked at your various projects, maybe in your groups, maybe you're doing it alone, all of that is fine. And you are putting together what's basically a combination of a pitch deck and a business plan. It's not really like a full-blown business plan like you would have for a company, but it's also not just a pitch deck that you would pitch to like a Netflix. So the thing that to remember is when you put these decks together, first and foremost, think about where is it going. If it's a deck that's going to an executive at a network station, or if it's a deck that goes to a studio, or if the deck that goes to a streamer, you don't necessarily need all this financial information that we're going to talk about. You don't need a finance plan. You don't need a revenue stream, this and the other ROI thing, because they don't care. They pay for everything. They say, great, we just want to know what the idea is. We want to know that there is some there. We want to know this TV show is thought through. We want to know there is some seasons here. We want to know the characters are worked out. We want to know this is fun. It's creative. It's all about the creative and the visual and the mood and the people that you have attached on your talent side and on your show running side if it's a TV show. If it's an investor or anyone that gives you money, they want both. They want to see the idea. They want to see that it's valid. They want to see the finance plan that you put together on paper. Now, this is obviously a preliminary finance plan because none of this is real. When you write this business plan, you give them a path. You say, this is the path I'm going to take, and this is the path I know is going to make sense, and this is the path I'm going to initiate. Will things change? They always do, and investors know this. They just want to see that you have an idea of getting from A to Z. They want to know that there is a path that you have thought through that you can walk them through that makes sense to them. So all we're talking about is a thing that says, this is the movie I'm going to make. This is the TV show I'm going to make. Here's what it's supposed to be returning in monies. Here's where that money is coming from. Here's how I'm going to pay for my budget. Here's how that money comes back. Here's who gets paid what. Here's what is going to be left in the end. And here's what you're going to get. That's basically the situation. So when you have that plan thought out, which you will be able to do by the end of this course, you are able to say to the investor, here's what's going to happen. And you walk them through. So you're going to research your financials. You're going to research, what is my project worth? You look at similar projects and saying, okay, I'm doing a show that's basically a documentary series, and it's like, I'm just going to say it, The Dog Whisperer. My husband did this, so I'm just going to, all I could think about right now. And we're going to do a show that's just like it. And we know it was sold in 180 countries and made all this money. So this show is just going to be like that. That's one thing to say. It's not going to be enough for an equity investor because they're like, yeah, whatever. And in most cases, you're going to find that there isn't enough information for TV shows because they don't always market the budgets and they don't always market the revenues. For movies, it's a little easier because you can go to, Box Office Mojo, you can go to IMDb, you can see certain things. Is it correct? Who knows? But at least you have something like an Internet Movie Database link where you can link to and say to the investor, this is what they say it did. So, you're not entirely, it's not just kind of something you put out of your butt. But the problem with TV shows is you're not going to find that information necessarily. So you're going to have to do what you do in this class. You're going to have to put a finance plan together that's based on sales projections, revenue projections from all various resources, and it's based on the fact that you have thought through your finance plan. So that's why competitive analysis only gets you this far, and that's why you're going to have to use the elements you learn in this class to be able to get like a TV show or documentary show, something like that funded. Movies is one thing, but you also we're not just here to do movies. TV shows make so much more money right now, so why not do that? You're going to research your competition, of course, and say, well, there is a show like Dog Whisperer, and that is my competition, but my show is different because it talks about the relationship between the owner and their pet a little more, because now it's a family member. Now it's not just a pet. We take it to travel. We do all kinds of things. They're going to restaurants, and after COVID, it's a whole thing. You elevate your show from this example. You give them examples why, while the show is similar, you are better, and why you're different. So it is okay to give competition and similar shows. You use it to elevate yourself and show the investors, and this is also for the network peeps, why you're different and what you thought about. You will, of course, research your audience. So when you do a show that's for a young adult audience, you cater to that in your visual application, in the way you tell the story, in the way you design your characters, in the way you market this thing. If it's a global audience, 0 to 100 years, it's a little easier because you basically do something that's super commercial. If it's an art house movie that's maybe geared towards women between 40 and 60, you gear towards them. You need to think about, when you work on this project, who is likely going to want to watch this? And you can have this conversation with people that know about it, like the sales agent or maybe the studio that you're talking to, because they have their opinion where this stuff goes. I always check with my sales agent, because when I write something, I envision a certain audience, but that doesn't mean that the audience is actually the audience. So it's good to check on that. When you define your audience, you're also defining your market, but the market takes it a level higher, because now we're talking about not just your audience, but we're talking about countries and territories. Comedy doesn't travel well, doesn't always translate. So the Asian territories will likely not buy it. Certain Middle Eastern territories will likely not buy it. Yeah, I mean, Europe usually likes comedy, but then it really depends on what comedy it is. So there are certain genres that will not be applicable in all the markets that you're going to want to sell to. So you need to think about, am I doing this for a movie? If I do it, is it going to be R-rated? Am I going to sell everywhere it's R-rated? You know, you have to think about these things. Or can I make it a little softer, make it PG-16 or 13 or whatever these ratings are, to open up your market? So you can do what is called elevated genre and not eliminate the young adults, which I call everything under, potentially 18 in this case also, by saying they would watch this because they like this kind of content. So maybe you don't slash people's head offs and show it. There are ways to tell stories, tell the same story, choosing a different element to tell it, to open up your marketplace and to make it wider. And a lot of countries will not buy R-rated content because they know their limit in their distribution for it. So it is harder to sell. The same with period drama. So people always say period drama doesn't work. I have seen period drama to work, but here too, period drama works when it is relevant to what's happening today. You can tell a story about, I don't know, some LGBTQ subject matter that is period. What was the show that I watched the other day? There was period and was dealing with that. I forgot it already. Some Canadian show. Anyway, was a Canadian show about forgot it again. It doesn't matter. LGBTQ subject matter playing in the 1800s. No. Something. Great show, dealt with a very relevant subject matter today. So it's not to say that you can't have a period piece or a period show that is boring only because it's period. No, it could be dealing with something that is relevant today. So if you keep in mind to pitch it that way, to say this is a drama and it is period, but here it's why it's relevant today. Here's why I'm doing it. Keep in mind that that's your argument for making it now and for doing it. When you talk about distribution, you're talking about what the sales agent is. Who do you want to use as a sales agent? So you research sales agents, and you can do that on IMDb by looking who is selling. The companies are usually listed. I think it's IMDb Pro in that case. Sales agents are usually listed. And then you can click on the sales agent that is listed on IMDb Pro, and you can see what else they're selling. So you can research very simple on IMDb. I sometimes use Sinando because it's connected to the film festivals, but you don't have to do that because it costs money. I think IMDb Pro is cheaper. But you would research your sales agent and saying, here's what else they sold, and here's why they're good for this, and here's why I'm going to approach them, and here is why they're the right person for this, or the right sales agent for this. So you want to talk about what sales agent you're choosing and why you're choosing them. And the same for if you have a US partner. Okay, if you don't have a US partner, talk about who would be your ideal US partner for this if you could have your choice. Is it maybe Amazon? Is it a studio? Is it Netflix? Why are you going these routes? Or maybe both. And talk about why you are choosing this potentially to be the case. So that's something to think about when we talk about distribution. When we talk about location, we're talking about two elements when we talk about location. One is the visual element that's supporting your story. You need to talk about that. And then you're talking about the element that you're choosing the story in an authentic, the location because it's authentic. You want to shoot something in Berlin because it's about Berlin, and you need all the stuff that Berlin has in there. And it's, I don't know, something that happens today. So you go there because you find what you need there. Necessarily, I mean, if you can do second unit there, that's okay too. But you have to have a reason to go for a certain location, and you usually support it by the story. The other way to support it is that you say, I'm going to shoot this in this location because there is a highest subsidy available. I'm shooting right now, I'm preparing a period drama series. It plays in Berlin, and I'm not shooting it in Berlin. I'm shooting it in Belgium, and I'm shooting it in Cologne. And why? Because they're close together, and I want to take advantage of the fact that Belgium and Cologne combined give me about half my budget as a subsidy. That's a lot of money I want to tag onto. So what do? I'm sending a second unit to Berlin to shoot all the Berlin streets that I need. So there is a way to work it, but you need to explain it. So in my case, my business plan would say, yes, this is about an institute in Berlin, and Berlin plays a character in this series. However, I'm choosing to shoot it here and here, and I'm choosing to take the location Berlin in a second unit because I'm only getting so and so much money from the subsidies in Berlin. So you need to think about that in two ways, financially and creatively. When it's your first project that you're doing, it's always a good idea to combine forces with someone who's done something like this before, because it's something that makes investors feel comfortable, and you do a deal with them where you say to them, if you help me, you get this, and you really combine forces with them in a very defined way where they give you exactly what you need, so that you are not, you know, hiring someone and paying them a stupid retainer and they don't really do anything, and you can't really use them. So be specific as to why you're choosing this person. It's good for the business plan, of course, but be specific with the person, what you expect from them and what would get you to the next level. So on my show, as an example, again, I want a top showrunner I want to attach a top showrunner who has done this kind of show before and has done this kind of subject matter before, because I haven't. I've done a lot, but I haven't done this specific thing. And network stations and streamers, they're very special is the right word. I want to say limited in their way of imagining that a producer who has done 45 projects is probably likely going to be able to do a TV show like this, especially because I've done TV shows. But they are a little scared, especially with the new developments that's going on. So they want to also feel safe that you have a showrunner that they can look at and say, okay, if worse comes worse, it's his mistake. And we're sure it's not my mistake because I let them do this knowing that they have never done something like this. It's really more for the executives to feel safe in their decision-making process of greenlighting your show. Showrunners are just something they look at for TV shows. For movies, cast. Also a little bit the director, but it's usually cast. So this is where you're going to do your talent packaging and lay out your vision in a sense to say, here's why I'm using this path for this project on television side. Here's why I'm using this path for this project on the movie side. When we talked about the relevancy today, you use that whenever you work on anything you work on. It doesn't matter if it's a documentary, a TV show, a reality show. It doesn't really matter what content it is, but you also want to always connect it to why you're doing it now and why you're doing it today. I like to rehearse my pitches with someone just so that I can be streamlined. You're going to not have a lot of time. You might max out at like 5 to 10 minutes with whoever sits in front of you. And you want to be able to get enough across to keep them engaged and to not bore them. So going into too much detail is not necessarily great, like I do right now with all this stuff. You want to not, digress. So stick with the plan and stick with the essentials. And sometimes you don't know what the essentials are unless you present it to someone who then picks up on that, who says, well, this is kind of boring. I don't need to know this, but I thought this was interesting and maybe you can talk about more about this. So rehearse it with some, colleagues. Ideally not friends, unless they're also very business savvy, because friends, might likely not want to, be negative. But if you ask a business colleague and say, you can also ask a friend who has a strong business mind to say, just be honest with me and tell me what you think of this pitch and what you think I should change. So rehearse it a little bit. When I talk about skin in the game, I'm talking about the development that you do and the money you spend for development. So you option the book, potentially, you paid for the book option, you paid for the writer to write the pilot script, you paid for the writer to write the Bible, you paid someone to do the packaging. All these things, you paid someone to do a budget, a line producer, all these things have to be paid by the producer. So it's not just you come up with an idea and then everyone comes in and say, here's the money. You're going to have to know, and you're going to have to be okay with the fact that you're going to probably pay for development. And it's not a cheap, price tag, but it is our job as the people that create this business. And every project we do is like a mini business. We who create this mini business, we need to pay for the part of the creation of it. We need to pay for getting it into a place where someone else can find it interesting enough to spend their time on it and making it happen. But if you expect someone else to make it happen, and if you're lazy about this stuff, they will pick up on it immediately and they just block you and say, thanks, but no thanks. You don't want that. You want someone to see, you've paid this, you've done this, it's all ready, you thought it through, and you have skin in the game, and now it's ready. It has a value because it has a showrunner, it has attachments, they're ready to go. You talk to maybe the agent, you have had some conversations, they're ready to go if the equity investor would maybe back the offer. This is an okay conversation to have, because that's not something that's expected of you to do, to back an offer to talent, because you can't. There is no way, unless you have a rich grandmother somewhere or have a wealthy portfolio, I don't do it. So it's something that's okay to ask for, but you need to get it there to say, well, I had a conversation with the agent, and if we, would back an offer of this amount, they might likely to attach. And, do your research and talk to people that were representing the talent you want to attach. So that's kind of the work that you have to do in the beginning. So here I put a slide together of just the elements that you want to include. We don't need to go through it, but it's basically just something when you work on your business plan, you kind of go through all of this and just check mark, do I have this, do I have that, do I have this. So you have mood references that kind of talk about, the mood references really suggest the tone. They suggest the touchy-feeliness of it, the emotional component. So that's why you want to choose visuals in colors that represent the mood and the tone of the project you are trying to make. You have a one-page summary of the story, never more than one page. It's actually great if it's less than that. You have one page with your lead characters. If it's a TV show, it might be more than one page, it might be two, but then I would say just make it so that it's maybe like a third or a fourth for each character. And what you write in there, in the characters, you have to always think about, I have to understand who this person is with these 2, 3, 5, 7 lines. So I need to understand who they are, where they come from, what the issue is, who they're in conflict with, why they are in conflict with them, and what the ideal solution would be. You don't tell the end story. You don't say this is what's going to happen in the end and this is how they fix it all, because you don't want to do that. But you want to give me enough so I understand what I'm dealing with this character. Now, if it's a character for a TV show, you want to give me an idea of what happens through the character arc for season 1, and then maybe give me something for season 2. Just give me an idea where this character starts and where you're going to lead the character in the end. For the movie, it's a little easier because it's 90 minutes and the character is usually more confined. For a TV show, you're going to have deeper character work. So for TV shows, for TV show pitch decks, I would take a little more time in describing your character so you can go through all the motions that you want to display and want people to understand, so that it's a colorful and interesting character. You want to always, when I say USP, unique selling point, you want to always talk about why your project is what it is and why it's not like anything else anyone has ever seen. That's really the short of it. You can use competition projects, obviously, to compare it, but you don't, it's not gonna, you still need revenue structures and revenue projections. When we talk about the genre and the target audience, they usually kind of need to match. So when you have an R-rated horror movie and tell me it's going to sell in 180 countries and make 120%, I'm going to say, I don't think so. Unless Lionsgate buys it and blows it out the roof and it's going to be theatrical and it's going to be the second Blair Witch, okay. But you have to just know that if you limit your audience, if you limit your target audience through rating, you're going to limit your marketplace. And if you do that, that's okay, but don't overdo then the projection part of it. You would put the sales estimate sheet in there if you want to. You don't necessarily have to. I offer them as an attachment if they want to. So what I do is I say sales estimates are projected for this number for low, this number for medium, this number for high. I give them 3. And usually what I do is I take my take and ask, and I add a middle one and just put half of it, like what the difference is half, I just put in the middle. So it's really something I add because investors sometimes like it. Do you need to do it? No, you can also just do low and take and ask. But you do want to just at least put the number in. You don't have to show the entire estimates. I would put that as an attachment, but put the number in. And then for the top sheet budget, I personally don't put it in a business plan. Some people like it. I just say this is the estimated production cost, and I'm not adding the top sheet. Investors are going to want to see, if they want to see a budget, they're likely going to they're going to ask you because they want to see how much money you're making, how much money everyone's making. They want to get a top sheet to see where's above the line, where's below the line falling into place. And sometimes they want the entire budget. I attach it. So I don't think you need to put a top sheet in there. I'm just letting you know to prepare one so that you have it if you need it. The sales agent opinion letter is something you don't need to put in, but I like, because there is an outside party who is going to be selling your movie that's going to say, we find this is a very commercial project and we would be inclined to sell it and we like it because If you can get one, it's great. Do you need it? Not necessarily, but it would be nice to have. So that's why I'm putting it in here. You want to talk about brand components. Like if you decide you're going to do a beauty show, like when I did Global Beauty Masters for TLC, in my pitch deck, I had in that I'm working with Paul Mitchell, I'm working with Chi, I'm working with Revlon, I'm working with Vela. And I did have these conversations, and we did work with all these brands because it was a buy-on show. So you can mention brands that you feel are in line with your genre, with your story, and with your target audience. And you can say, I'm going to do a brand campaign together with these brands because it's going to elevate the awareness about the project, and it's going to elevate the eyeballs because the brand will also go and market this for me with me. So it is a good point to make if you have a project that will work it. Period piece is not ideal because who cares? I mean, you're not going to find a Coke bottle in a period piece. Same for science fiction if it's too in the front. If it's a close science fiction, yeah, you could maybe do like a futuristic car from BMW, for example. I mean, there are things you can do with futuristic sci-fi that is close enough to where we are today. But if it goes further, not ideal for brands either. You do want to talk about your finance plan in a way that you say, this is a tentative finance plan. I am attempting to work with the fact that we're going to have 70% out of international. I'm going to attempt to get 35% out of the US for US license, or 25, whatever you decide. I'm going to shoot in this location that gives me 35% of my production costs back. And I am going to work with this brand, and I am going to do a little crowdfunding, and I am going to work with the music investor. What your finance plan is that you have in mind, this is where you share this. You basically talk about what you want to do and why you want to do it this way. And then you kind of summarize it in a nice little finance plan, and you run the ROI assumption. You don't need a detailed spreadsheet like what I'm doing. This is for you to use to get to the ROI assumption, and for you to send to the investor if they ask for it, and they will likely ask for it because they want to see backup for your calculations. So they're going to want to see a spreadsheet that says, here are the sales estimates, here's the finance plan, here's all the costs related, and here's what we're going to end up doing. So it's basically what we're doing. They want to see all this, and you can send it as a attachment. What you don't want to do is put like a spreadsheet in your business plan. No one can really read that unless it's a defined spreadsheet that says, here's how, here's what's coming from there, here's what's coming from there, here's what's coming from there, here's what's coming for 4 things. That's okay. You want to talk about the risks that are there. Production risk. The risk for production is that there's not going to be enough money, or that the budget is going to go over. It's a risk of abandonment. The movie's not going to get finished. The TV show's not going to get finished. Someone breaks their leg. All these risks are production risk. you're going to tell the investor, we're not dealing with any of them because we're insuring ourselves against them because we're using a completion bond insurance, which ensures the on time and on budget production of this thing and anything that can go wrong. So investors are going to like that. They might not even know completion bond exists. You want to do it, you want to give them that as a mitigation tool. You also want to mitigate the fact that, monies can go sideways, could be stolen, this and the other, who knows. You don't get your hand on the money. The completion bond gets the money when it's being funded and it releases it to you based in accordance with a production cash flow plan that they will bond and approve. And the revenues are not touched by you either because those are touched by the collection agent only. Those are the two very important mitigation aspects that you want to communicate with the investor because those are important. They talk about how money cannot get lost, how things can get more expensive, how this thing is going to be delivered on time and sold properly, and how no one can steal any money or get paid what they shouldn't be getting paid. These are risks that people are very nervous about, and they happen a lot in our industry, and investors know this. So you want to go straightforward and say, these are the risks, here's how I mitigate them. You will be very clear and tell your investor there is the risk for you to lose all your money. You're going to have to be clear about that. Most people, are shy about it, but don't be shy because investors know when they invest in Hollywood, they're not putting the money in a CD. They know there is a risk associated with it, so they're okay with that. You're going to talk about your interest and how it's aligned with the investor, and here's why it's aligned. You put all the money in where you show skin in the game because you got the project to a point where it has a value now for it to be invested into. And you're not going to see any profit until your investor is paid and his premium is paid. You get paid after him. That's going to make him very comfortable. You need to make sure that you bring that across because they then understand that it is in your interest to make sure they get paid. That is a conversation that you definitely want to focus on and say, here's why that happens. You want to talk about your vision. You can write, I would say, a third of a paragraph. Here's why I'm doing this. Here's why I think it's relevant. And here's why my personal passion is connected to it. Investors equity investors invest in people. So they want to know where your passion lays and why you think this is going to be done this way and it's the right way. The director's vision is important because he's going to carry out your vision. So the director elevates what you say, and it would be good to have a director's vision in there if you can get it, right? If you don't have a director by the time you put it together, then just put your vision in there, and that's okay too. And then it's okay to name all the team members that you have. For example, you're doing a period piece. You need a great set designer and you need a great costume designer. Pick some, look online who they are, and maybe, contact a few and say, I'm planning this. Would this be interesting to you? And just put those people in. DPs. Find a DP who has done something similar in like a visual sense. And, talk to them. Again, they're all on IMDb Pro, and usually their contact information is there too. And if it's the agent, you talk to the agent and say, I'm putting this together. I would like, maybe your costume designer and your so-and-so to be a part of it. Would you happen to share? La, 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 la. So see if you can get some people that are essential crew people to attach. If it's a science fiction, you will attach a killer visual effects house. There are a ton of those, and they will be glad to attach to you. If it's a comedy, well, it doesn't really matter then. Then it's more about, okay, who are the producers, who is the cast. So director and talent is more important there. But it doesn't just have to do with, who's my director, who's my cast. You could really go as far as saying, who's in my crew that stands out? Who is my sales agent that has sold this and stands out? What's their track record? Who are my brands to support me? So these are all the things where you can push your project forward and saying, I have amazing people that help me realize this. You do want to make sure that you have the chain of title full. You don't need to do a chain of title, how is it called, compliance. I talked to Marion about this the other day. You don't have to do a full chain of title approval thingy with Dennis Angels, which is a company that basically does a chain of title research and makes sure that the chain of title is clean. You don't need to do that at this point. What you want to do is you want to make sure that there is an option agreement in place between you and the person whose project you're optioning. If there are any underlying rights that this idea is based on, you want to make sure that those underlying rights are secured. Those two things are important. So whoever has it or had it before, you want to deal with to make sure that there's no turnaround stuff that's going to bite you in the butt. These are the main things for you to do, and that's it. Do you need to put that in there? No, but you're going to likely have to show it to the investor because they're going to ask for it. If you do a reality show or a documentary, anything that's not fictional, it would be good to have a sizzle reel, because a reality show and a documentary series is driven by the people that are in it. And if those are lamos and they're boring and they're not interesting on TV, you already lost everyone. So you're going to need that not only to attach a sales agent, to attach a network, but to really, get the equity, get the investors interested in it as well. You don't need to do a reel for a movie or a TV show. Now, when you do a animation series or an animation movie, you're going to want to do a reel as well, because people want to see what the quality of that animation would look like. So there are certain content pieces where you're going to need to do a mood reel, a sizzle reel. If it's you could do a website as well, where you put all this stuff as a password protected content piece, so that investors can go in and just download whatever they want to download, which is something I mostly do. And the website just has a first like moody little nice cover where you can get interested and enticed, and then everything else, all the details are behind it and they're password protected. That's something I think is not a bad idea. Also, when you do a slate deal, put a little website together that talks about all the things you want to do. Don't give away too much, because you don't want people to steal your ideas, but that they can because you secured them. But you can do something moody and interesting here. Any questions about this?
I have one question.
Yeah.
For the pitch or for the business plan, that can be the pitch deck, like all that information can be in the pitch deck. Is that correct?
Yes.
So we don't need a separate.
Thank you, Dominique, for helping me clarify this. When I talk about the business plan, I really talk about a project pitch deck with financials.
Okay.
That's really what it is. So it's a creative piece. It's not a product placement memorandum, not product placement, darn it. The PPM, what does it stand for? Product placement memorandum? No, I can't. See, I'm not good at night. I usually do these things at 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm not sharp with that. So when you have a PPM, which is something that people, use when they attach or when they try to contact accredited investors in the US. I can't think of the word now. Anyway, if you think of it, please tell me. It's a
private placement memorandum, I think.
Thank you, private placement memorandum. God, I'm so bad. I've done a few of those and I've dealt with a few of those. Those are really boring. They're black and white, and they basically have all the rules and regulations the Security and Exchange Commission wants you to put in there. It's a legal thing that reads really boring. It's going to have a little bit about your project. Here's my project, and here's why it's great. And then the rest is all jingle, jingle, jingle jargon. It is what it is, because you need to adhere with those regulations, of course, when you do go to accredited investors in the US. An accredited investor is someone who has to make a certain minimum amount on their tax return so that you can even approach them. That minimum amount is changing all the time. I think it's 250,000 right now, but it can change. So don't quote me on this. So what that means is that you can only go to those kind of investors. When you deal with PPMs, I would always go to like a brokerage firm to have them approach the investors and not have you do it, because it's iffy stuff, and yeah. So have a brokerage firm deal with it and say, here's my PPM, it's fantastic. Take the pitch deck with it. When I do investments in the US and I deal with brokerage houses for PPMs, I tell them, give them the boring PPM, and then please also give them my business plan. So they get both. So they get a little enticed. Now, the business plan is basically something you can use a lot with equity investors that you know, that you talk to, that you approach, with angel investors or people like that, where you say, this is my idea, this is what I'm doing. You can use it also to raise your development money. I don't know if we talked about development money yet, but if you have a large development, I mean, the development is expensive, because once you attach cast and talent, someone has to pay for all this. So there is a certain portion you can do on your own, but there is another portion you will likely need an investor for. And you can tell the investor, here's my fantastic pitch deck and here's my path. And now in order to put this all together, I would like this and this much development, 100,000. No, this is something that's a smaller investment, and it gets paid back right at the time of closing, which is the time when the first money is released by the bond company. So they don't wait until the recoupment is happening. They don't wait 2 years to get their money back. They get their money back literally the first day you start shooting, or the first day the completion bond is closing, and they get the premium on top. So that guy that gave you 100,000 in development gets 120, and the movie hasn't even started. So this is something to entice them with, and you also give them a back end, and you say, you're taking a lot of risk because you're helping me get this to a place where it needs to be. You're getting 120,000 on your 100,000, but you're also going to get profit participation of, let's say, 2.5 points. So you're participating in this entire project, and you already got your money back, and it's a small investment. So these kind of investments, you can have a conversation with an investor who says, I don't want to wait 3 years to make 20% of this. I'm giving it to you now. Make it happen in the next 6 months and give me my money back. Will likely take a little more than that, but it shouldn't take more than a year if it's a good project for you to be able to do it, depending on the project, I should say. I've taken longer sometimes to get projects together, but I've also done it in 6 to 8 months. Depends on the project. So it is a conversation to be had, so you don't have to carry the heavy burden just by yourself. But the pitch deck we're working on is for that purpose as well, because these people want to know, if I give you this development money, what's going to happen? How are you going to realize the project? Because I don't get paid unless you're actually realizing the project. So I want to know the path that you're taking to do that. That's why it's important to have this, not just for development, but also for the equity investment, which is obviously the portion that you get financed in order to cover the production costs. So to answer your question, Dominique, it is a business plan, but it is a pitch deck with financials. Long answer. So when you do your SPV, which is the company that holds the production rights, it's not necessarily your production company. So you have a production company, whatever, so-and-so, let's say Dominique LLC, and that's her production company, right? And Dominique decides, I'm going to make the movie Kill Me Now. And that LLC would be Kill Me Now LLC, or Kill Me Now the Movie LLC. Every project you do has its own vehicle. You do not want to mix them up. Even when you do a slate deal, every project you do has its own vehicle. And then the slate has its own vehicle combining all the projects. And then the company, the production company, is over the slate company. So there are layers here that you need to do. And sometimes what I do is I even separated the merchandising from the production. So I have a Dominique production company. I have Kill Me Now, the production entity that films, does the production services. And I have Kill Me Now merchandising for all the ancillary rights. So I separate it sometimes too. So it depends on what kind of project I work on. But if I have a project that has a lot of merchandising potential, I take the merchandising out and do that separately. So just keep that in mind. That's are the SPVs that are holding the rights, and they're holding the rights you give them. So if it's the movie company, it holds the rights to take all the distribution revenues in and produce. If it's the merchandising, it's the company that holds the merchandising licensing rights and will monetize those and do all the merchandising deals. So it is okay to have them separate. It doesn't mean that you take money away from your investor, because they both will report to the collection agency, but it ring fences if something happens with the production, or if you get sued, or some crew member sues you for, I don't know, workman's comp or something crazy, who knows, you're not risking the entire entity with all the revenue potential, because you're separating and have a Chinese wall between them. When I talk about alternative investment offices, I talk about brokerage houses that do what is called alternative investments. And that's the asset group that we're in. We as movies are alternative investment opportunities. So there are family offices. It's basically rich families who have created an investment office where they diversify their investment portfolio. So it's one office for one family that is wealthy, and they usually have a foundation, and they have all these other things, and then they diversify these monies. And it's usually a person that says, I'm the manager for this fund for the family, and I'm diversifying, and I'm putting a little bit into this documentary series because I think the Rothwells or whatever, they love this. There are brokerage houses, which I call, which I would say is more like boutique financial firms that do all different kinds of investments, and they usually also do alternative investments. So those are people that you can contact with this business plan that you're doing and saying, here's what I'm doing. Is this something that could be interesting for you? Is this something you could show your clients? What do you think? So you can research online, and they change all the time, by the way. It's not like they're always the same. They open, they close, they go, they. So for me, I can't even give you a list because some of the people I work with, they don't even exist anymore. But there are, you want to start with people that do media investments, like Apollo Media, which is a company that is in England and in New York. They're known for doing investments. There's a company called Summit Media. These are companies that have been around for a while and they do this. So there are certain media investment companies that are known, and when you read Variety and Hollywood Reporter, you read all about them. And I would always contact them first. And then you go to these alternative investment offices, because right now, especially, there's so much going on in the stock market that is not great, great, and not great, great, and not great, goes up and down. There's so much going on in like the, Bitcoin, this, that, and the other. People are a little unsure, for lack of a better word. So they are looking to diversify more. So it's not the worst time to offer this kind of investment to an investment company. They are looking to diversify, and they are looking to put the monies in places where, you never know. Given the fact that content is in demand, and given that you can honestly say all these platforms need content, and there are more and more and more platforms, and the studios are securing their content and not sharing it with the platforms, will of course lead to the fact that more content needs to be produced. There's only so many A-level showrunners, and there's only so many A-level cast. There is much more content that needs to be produced than the people that can do it. So this is the time for us who are not like A-level showrunners to do this content, because our content is needed. And that's a good conversation to be had with these investment offices that understand, and who understand there are all these platforms, everything is going online, they get that part. They see in the trades how billions of dollars are spent by these platforms and network stations to secure content. So they know there are buyers there for it. And that's basically they're out. They know if you produce the content, these people are going to pay you for it. So you can establish the fact that there is a market. And that's what you want to do with these alternative investment offices. And of course, your investor. There are online investor portals. I would say this is like, what is it? There's one called, I think you guys know Slated. There are certain portals where you find investors that do media. Slated is one, slated.com. I'm trying to find another one. Sometimes I'm going to look into this a little more for you and see. Slated is the only one that I know is very active. So you can look into that one and see if you can put your project on there and see if there are investors that would help you with development or production funding. And then executive producers that you can work with that have deals with certain networks or studios that could be your showrunner for a TV show, for example, because they already have a deal and they're looking for content. Production companies that are owned by actors, where the actors are looking for content that they can play, where they can also produce and can dictate the path of the content, especially the way they are seen in the content a little more, which actors like. So don't be shy to contact production companies that are owned by showrunners that have deals, and don't be shy to contact production companies that are owned by actors that you think would make sense for your show or for your movie. And then there are sales agents like Film Nation, I Am Global. I think Lotus does it, Lotus Pictures, Annapurna. There are certain sales agents that also finance. So those are the companies you want to see, and you will read that in the trades. They will announce something where they announce themselves as co-producers who co-finance. This is why you need to keep up on what's going on in the trades, because these things change all the time. But there is a great resource happening there for you to really look into. Talk a little bit about free money. We understand the concept of brandtainment, which is really not product placement. Product placement is really just, here is my Gerolsteiner bottle and it's in the scrape. Brandtainment is exactly what it says. It's entertainment that is supported by the brand and their message, where the brand is integrated into it and has a benefit from it, and your character has a benefit from the brand. It's a two-way street. And these things really work very well together. You can do entire shows like that, like the beauty show that I did. I mean, we used the tools of these beauty companies in a very organic way because it was a beauty competition show and we had to use tools like that. We would have bought them no matter what. So it was an organic usage of the tool, and all we did is we specified why we use this tool in this situation because of its attributes, also very organic. So that's what you think about when you try to get sponsors to attach to your show and you try to sell them on it. Tax incentives are US and international incentives that we look at. Now for the US, it's pretty straightforward. You go to Entertainment Partners website, you go to their incentive map and you see exactly who's giving you what for when at this very moment. They're great about that. So you can educate yourself because these things are changing all the time. It doesn't really matter for you if it's a tax credit or a tax rebate because you're going to use a tax incentive lender to help you finance your show, and you're not going to worry about that part. The incentive lender's job is to then get the money back, and either if they have to resell the credit to get it back or if they just do a tax return to get it back, not your problem. Now, internationally, we're going to, and this is, I mean, we talked about this, I don't want to get too much into it. Internationally, this is what's happening. You're going to go to places where there are official treaty co-productions already in place. Canada has a treaty co-production with Germany, Italy, Spain, everyone that moves. They do. And they are great to work with because it's basically like working with the US, but not being the US. And if you have a company that you work with in Canada that has, and you tell them, I want to do a show, Canadian, French, I want to shoot some in French, some in Canada, you can work that out with them and you get special subsidy allocations, not just because you're shooting in Canada and you get the Canadian subsidy, but you're also getting money from France because you're shooting something there. The advantage is that in both territories, you're going to get higher license fees because you now are considered official local content because you are a treaty, you're an official co-production treaty. So it's not like me selling an American show to France that gives me 5% of the budget. It's now me sending a Canadian-French co-production to France who now gives me 15% of the budget. It's a big difference. So if you do an official co-production, you can get higher license fees from the territories that you're selling into. That's a given. If you are a US party that wants to do a show in another country, you're always going to do a co-production deal with a local producer. That's just a given. And they will then guide you through the processes of getting the subsidy given to you. I need to turn on the light. Hold on a second. I'm getting too dark here. One second, please. Light. Sorry about that. I'm back. So your idea is you're going to find someone locally, and that's something you can actually do on Sinando, because there's a lot of international producers listed on there, sinando.com. I think it's also in the module. And you can see what else they have done, and then you contact them and say, I would like to shoot this in Italy, and I would like to get the 35% tax incentive there. Can you walk me through the potential of how to make this happen? And usually what you pay is about 5% of whatever money they're raising. You have to remember that when you do the deal with them, they're going to likely need the rights for a certain period of time in order to be able to get to the subsidy, and then the rights fall back to you. Something to remember and think about. The nice thing about international subsidies is that you don't have to cash flow them. You don't need a tax credit lender. Many of those subsidies, I'm not saying all of them, but many of them are released to you in accordance with the bonded cash flow plan that you have. So there is no need for you to worry about anything like, how am I getting this money, yada, yada. It's there. And since you don't have to pay it back in many cases, you're fine. Now, in Germany, there is something that is called bedingt rückzahlbar, which means you are paying some of it back, but you're paying it back after you made your profits. So remember that waterfall that we did earlier? So you would give that waterfall to the German subsidy board, and you would say, here's how much money I think I'm going to make with this. And I'm going to make this much, I'm going to want to make this much profit. And after I make this much profit, I'm going to then pay you back what you gave me. And it's not all of it. Like the tax credit portion in Germany, for example, you do not have to pay back. As far as I know, right now, my chain. The subsidy portion, where it's driven by a committee that decides whether or not they give you more, sometimes many cases has to be repaid. But here's what's happening. If you pay that, now at this point you already made your money. So if you do pay it back, it sits there to be used for the next project. It's not just giving back to them. You can actually use it when you go back there and say, I'm now going to do another co-production between Germany and, I don't know, South Africa, which is also a possible treaty co-production. And now I'm going to use my German money and I'm going to ask for more. So now that portion is available for you to be added to what you would have gotten otherwise as well. So just keep in mind that while some of it is paybackable, recoupable, it is not lost. Obviously, crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, I just want to talk about the difference. Crowdfunding is you get people to give you money, you send them a t-shirt or a hat. Sometimes they get, if they give you a lot of money, you might give them some points, and that's it. You don't pay it back. Crowdsourcing, like on Stage 32 website, for example, is people give you their services for free or for a reduced amount. You're now going on Stage 32, for example, and say, I really want this DP because it's really cool and it's great. I can't really pay his rate, but maybe I can talk to him about working for me for half, and then I'm putting the rest. It's basically a deferment deal. Or you have a line producer that is on Stage 32, and right now they are a production coordinator, or let's say they're just a UPM, and they want to have a line producing credit. So they might say to you, I am a UPM, unit production manager. I want to upgrade to a line producing credit. I'm ready to do the job. Will you hire me? And I might just work for free so that I can get a line producing credit, which helps their career. So there are conversations to be had with people that are in a certain place in their career and want to upgrade, and you give them the chance to upgrade, and they give you services for free. You have to make sure that they know what they're doing, obviously, when you give them services for free, but that's something to think about. We talked about music investments. So the thing you need to consider here is that the music supervisor is likely someone who's going to come from the music investment company. It's not the worst. It might be someone that they suggest. Worst case is you suggest someone that they have to approve. So that's the only thing you have to be aware of, because they need to make sure that the music is handled properly, that there is a supervisor that they are comfortable with. So that's the only kind of thing you just need to know. Everything else would go as you would have your music, you would license your songs, you would do a lot of original music, you would get your composer. So they're not going to dictate to you who you have to hire for this music department situation, music editor and so forth. That's all up to you, and they're paid for these people. But the music supervisor is probably going to be someone they're going to want to approve. So let's talk about these different producers. The producer. In the movie world, the producer is the most important credit. This is a credit you do not give to anyone ever other than yourself. Okay? You own the rights, you develop the project, you bleed and sweat this thing into reality. You do not give this producing credit to someone else. You can give them a co-producing credit, you can give them an executive producing credit. We'll talk about that. You can give them anything else, but you're not giving them a producer credit if you do a movie. If you do a TV show, producer is basically like, it's a lower level credit under the executive producer credit. It's more like I'm going to do the job and realizing this show credit. So it's a little bit like a production supervisor with creative approval rights. Some approval rights, not all of them. Because the more important credit for the TV show that you don't ever give to anyone is the executive producer credit. But the producer is really the one that takes all the responsibility, that drives the show, that does anything and everything, and that controls everything. For film. For TV, again, that role is taken by the executive producer. So when we talk about the co-producer, this can be like the co-producer that you use in the region when you do a show in Italy. You have a local co-producer. This is someone you can also give a credit to when they say, for example, I'm friends with Halle Berry and I can get her to play in your movie. Okay, that's a great thing. Now you become a co-producer because you got me Halle Berry. Or they got you a director. Or they got you some money. Or they got you some development. The co-producer credit you can use for very different things that are worthy of being seen to elevate the project and get it ready to the next step in a meaningful way. Someone gives you a location, someone gets you 100,000 on a $5 million movie, not a co-producer. This is the co-producer is someone who meaningfully supports your project, and that has to be financially on the distribution level or on a talent level. That's what a co-producer does, or is a local producer that you hire to help you realize the show and get subsidies. The executive producer for film is usually someone related to financing or distribution. Funny enough, studio execs get executive producer credit, Netflix exec gets executive producer credit. The financiers usually get executive producer credit. So this is a credit that goes into the mostly financing world, and it's also the sometimes distribution world for film. For TV, very different. TV is the most important credit. You do not ever give to anyone. So when you do a TV show, the executive producer is you and no one else, other than your showrunner. Now, your showrunner is obviously getting an executive producer credit because that's what he does. He's executive producing the show, and that's his thing. So you need to know that in these different content pieces that you do, these credits mean different things. Now, when we talk about a co-executive producer in the film world, it is someone who gives you some money. Like the development financier would be a co-producer, a co-executive producer, because he gave you the development money. Someone that got you money could be a co-executive producer. Someone who got your talent could be a co-executive producer. So this is someone who is like a bridge to someone who gives a meaningful contribution to your movie. In the world of TV, the co-executive producer is someone who is meaningfully involved in the creation in the writing of a show, works very close with you as the executive producer and the showrunner, and is involved in the creative aspect. But he's not the executive producer. But he is close to and has also a strong a capability in the creative, making things happen component of a TV show. A supervising producer is someone who really handles more the physical production and makes sure that everything is going in line. This is someone who is usually above the line producer, who is making sure that the line producer does everything right, the UPM does everything right, everyone on budgetary components, the accountant does everything right. Everything is done properly and according to budget. It's similar in television. This is someone who's hired to be responsible for the physical production and any element related to just the physical production of a TV show or a movie. By the way, I'm going to send this to you later, so you don't have to read it all now. A line producer is pretty straightforward. He or she handles the budget and handles all the estimates in accordance with the budget, makes sure everything is done properly in accordance with the budget, and is really responsible for the money side of things, and is responsible for keeping the show on budget and keeping all the departments on budget. The associate producer is someone who can do smaller things that advance you in your project. Like maybe they find you a killer location that you don't have to pay for, or they find you a great casting director who gets you the cast you're looking for, or they are the casting director who wants an associate producer credit, or it's an investor who has a girlfriend that's in the movie who wants to also have a producing career and gets an associate producer credit. This is a credit you can be generous with, for long story short. So anyone who wants a producer credit, you can say, you know what, this is great. I'm going to give you the associate producer credit. Sounds good. You can do that. There isn't really a limit to this credit. It's just not a credit you need to worry about too much, and you can give to people to help them elevate their career or give them a sign of your appreciation for helping you moving forward with the project. The creative producer is someone who is very much involved in the development part of your show, TV and film. Someone also who's handling the packaging part, the talent part, dealing with the writers, really responsible for the vision and the creative aspect of a film or TV series. They're not involved in financing. They're not involved in distribution. They're really just involved in working with you and your creative brain on making this vision become reality. So that's kind of what they are. Any questions about this? Or any questions about anything we've talked about so far? No. Okay. Then. Yeah.
I had a question. Going back to the comma.
Yes.
who generates that? Is that you with your lawyer, or is that
Uh,
you are collaborating with the collection agency and forming the comma, or how does that work?
Very good question. Here's the very simple answer. The collection agent does. You don't have to worry about it. They
Okay.
generate a draft based on your information that you give them. So you call them up and you say, here's what I'm doing. I have this equity investor giving me this much. They want 20%. I have this bank giving me this term sheet. They're going to do these and these pre-sales. I have the sales agent wanting this. You give them the information, they give you a draft. You look at the draft to make sure all your contractual pointers that you have agreed with the people are in there. And then they start circulating it to the parties so that they can confirm that all their contractual pointers are in there. And then it goes to SAC, collection agent sends it to SAC. Usually they do all that. They're usually great about circulating this with all the parties. So you really don't have to worry about it. What you need to make sure is that when the final draft comes around, it goes and people do red line, red line, red line, red line. So all you need to read is the red lines. And then when the final version comes around, the final draft, that's the one you want to send to your lawyer to make sure that all the stuff that you have negotiated is actually in there and that you're protected. Right? So you don't want to have a lawyer, you don't want to waste lawyer money for this early on. Just have the collection agent deal with it.
And the lawyer money would be more associated with forming the agreements with talent and
Well,
other things.
Depends, because what you send to talent is first you send them a pay or play offer, which I think there is an example online on the
Right.
if you use, right? You
Mhm.
send the script with that pay or play offer. That's the first thing that happens. Based on those terms, there's going to be an engagement letter done. These letters are boilerplate. Any, I would say, good production lawyer who shouldn't be expensive can handle all these crew and talent deals because they're pretty much boilerplate agreements. The agreement where you want to be careful with, or you want to have a lawyer, is anything relating to financing and distribution. So you want to have a lawyer look at your sales agency agreement. You want to have a lawyer look at your finance agreement with your investor. You want to have your lawyer look at your co-producer agreement. You want to make sure these rights come back to you. There are certain agreements where I would say that's it. The crew agreements and the talent crew agreements can also be done by the line producer, by the way. I mean, have them send it out because again, it's boilerplate. And you likely will have a like an entertainment partners or any kind of the payroll houses anyway to deal with your crew. You don't want to deal with that. But the agreements can be done by the line producer, not necessarily, don't even have to, usually they know how to do this. But you can have a production lawyer just to do that. Again, they're not that expensive. The more expensive ones are the ones that deal with the IFI agreements relating to financing and distribution. And if you need a recommendation for someone, I'm happy to share that with you. I have worked with pretty much every law firm, Loeb & Loeb, Shepard Mullen, you name them, all of them, all the big ones, anywhere from $650 to $850 an hour. And I cannot really say that the big law firms are necessarily the best law firms. I have found this litigator through coincidence because, of a lawsuit basically. And I have found him to be very good. He was on the other side and he kicked my butt. And I respect that. I was like, oh my God, this guy's really smart. Wow, he really knows his stuff. He can call my bullshit. I like this guy. So I called him up and I said, listen, I like the way you work. I like your he has this, he knows how to maneuver emotionally and he's just really good in his negotiation tactics and all of it. So I said, I would like to hire you to represent me on all my stuff, on all my, things that I do and all the distribution. And he gave me a good deal. And I'm very happy with having someone who I don't have to pay $650 an hour to work on my projects and just really do that work. And what I like about having a litigator do transactional work is that they know what can go wrong because they're litigators. They've seen it, like the guy from the insurance. We've seen it all. We pay it all. What those guys is crazy advertising. Anyway, point is, if you have someone looking at your agreements who already knows what can go wrong, they structure an agreement differently. That is my personal opinion. I have had good experience with that kind of decision, and I wish I would have, done it earlier, honestly. But yeah, you live and you learn. So if you need a recommendation, I'm happy to give you one. And if you need a production lawyer recommendation for someone who is not expensive, can just work on the crew deals, I can give you a recommendation for that as well. So anyone who needs this, just email me and we're good to go. Any more questions? So do we have any questions about the group project, or are there any concerns? Is there anything that I can help with for your group project? that you guys are working on? No?
With regards to the story, how detailed should we be? Should we keep it pretty high level?
No, you, as I mentioned earlier, summary 1 page, the end.
Okay. Okay.
You know, I just want to understand what it's for. When we do you pitch to me, and I think I'll likely have Jim, my husband, do that too, because he's great with the pitches. We do he's like Simon Cowell kind of guy. I'm usually more gentle because I fall in love with all my students. Anyway, but he's like, okay, this doesn't work. So I usually do it where I have you guys pitch to both of us. I am responding then to the creative and the financial point. He's responding more to the what would a network executive or studio executive look at this like. So I would be your investor type, and he would be your executive type. So I'm gonna try to schedule it at a time where we're both available, and then you would pitch to both of us. I mean, your group or yourself, whatever you do, and then we just do that, and we'll give you feedback on everything. And that way, you know what works, what doesn't work, and you also see where things go, and you can slice up how you present it. I had some groups present where they separated who presents what, which is kind of cute. Or someone says, I am presenting my own project, so they walk me through their entire project. And there's going to be a time limit on these projects, depending on how many people want to pitch. If you don't want to pitch, you don't have to. If you didn't do a project, you don't have to. It's an extra credit, as we said. If I just have a few people pitch, everyone else who's on the Zoom or watches it later in the recording is going to learn something from just those few projects that we're going to hear about. So it's not necessary for you to do it. You're going to learn one way or the other just by the few people. And I think we have a few groups that are doing projects, and we have a few single people that are doing them. So we're going to get the benefit of listening to some that will work. So I think I can, hold on, is there anything else? No, I think we're stopped. So prep, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Yes. I'm going to stop share. So I'm going to see you again in 2 weeks. I'm going to see some of you after now. I'm going to see you again in 2 weeks. I think from here, from LA. So I'm going to use this link. I'm going to be back by then from Germany. I wasn't sure if I have proper internet with my mother, and there's all that. She lives in the middle of nowhere. So I'm going to do the regular date on the Saturday in 2 weeks again. And if you have any questions, you know where to find me. And I think we have a few people that have office hours. I think 7:30 is the first one. We're 7:27. Yay, we did it. 3 minutes to spare. Okay, and then yeah, don't be shy to contact me. And I think you guys are great about all these questions that you're sending. And I am answering some of the questions in a way where I actually put them on a discussion board, because they're really good questions, and I really think that everyone can benefit from it. So just go to the link on the discussion boards and just sometimes check in there to see if there is new questions there for you. That's my daughter's dog out there. Sorry about that. I think I'm going to stop the recording. It's getting too loud. Okay.